Happy Halloween, Anthony. Howdy. What are you dressed as?
That explains the cowboy hat.
What did you think that I just changed my look? That this was
I was like, what's up with the cowboy hat today? It's
so
a costume.
I am dressed as Cowboy Chris. No, this is just me now. I am this is who I am. What are you dressed as today, Anthony?
An entrepreneur.
I mean, the costume, like you're dressed up as a successful entrepreneur.
You're right, because I'm in a black t-shirt. You're correct. Yes.
Anthony, imagine a retail giant that once dominated the electronics market, led by a CEO obsessed with management efficiency, slashing costs, optimizing inventory, tightening up every process. Sounds about right? However, while they were buried in spreadsheets and micromanaging operations, they forgot one crucial thing: leading the company into the future. Competitors were innovating and focusing on customer experience, leaving this titan in the dust. Just a few short years, they went from a market leader declaring bankruptcy. Company was Circuit City. Did you ever shop at Circuit City, Anthony?
Yeah, all the time. It was an icon.
Yeah, I love Circuit City. I thought it was pretty cool. They focused too much on management and not about leadership, not about steering them straight. So, what is management? What is leadership? Let's dive into the differences between management and leadership and try to start to differentiate those two. When is it time to lead and when is it time to manage? Give us the framework, Anthony. How do you think about this?
Well, I mean, first of all, everybody's going to say, well, Secret City was doomed from the start because of what it sold. But I mean, Best Buy you could argue Best Buy is still thriving. So there was something more than just Amazon hurt Circuit City. I often see early founders that are switching from this managerial job into becoming an entrepreneur make this very same disconnect from what management is versus leadership. So the classic and the classic book on this is Traction, right? So there's two mindsets that a founder needs to have. One is that of an integrator, i.e. an operations person, a manager, and one of what they call a visionary, which I hate the term, but essentially it's the person that has the responsibility and the talent to look 6 months, 12 months, 5 years from now and start making chess moves today that will impact them in the future, not something that's going to impact them this quarter. So I think of manager as somebody that works on a quarterly basis with an eye towards the future, and a leader is somebody that looks at that works on the future state with an eye on the quarterly. What do you think, Chris?
I think you got it mostly nailed. I think that the way that I think about this is the way I teach it in my college class. I don't know if I mentioned that I'm a college professor, Anthony.
You've never said that.
Yeah, I don't know. Before. I don't know that if I mentioned that.
I would not have guessed. I would not have guessed.
Yeah, fair point. The way that I teach it is management is about execution of a plan. It is about discipline. It is about a system. It is about walking in, knowing what you're doing on any given day, driving forwards to some sort of a goal, some sort of an execution. But leadership is about where we're going, and leadership is about people, and it's about human beings, and it's about setting a direction for the company. It's about understanding where the company needs to go. The classic example I use is, look, management is about running the ship. But somebody's got to steer the ship. Somebody's got to say, where are we going? The captain's got to point the direction of the ship. And that's the difference between management and leadership. Does that resonate?
I don't know why in this topic I struggle with metaphors. I really do because that metaphor. So yes, that's the classic definition, but I struggle with that classic definition because it presents a visual that the direction has a path, a single path. And that you're steering a ship versus a series of strategies, and that always shift. Like if it's more, I view it more of a rocket ship in space because it's a 3-dimensional plane versus a 2D plane. But it's still even more complex than that. It's understanding. It's not just steering, it's understanding the weather patterns. It's understanding where pirates might be. It's understanding that Bob down in the galley is a problem, and you need to figure out your galley situation. Like it's all of the things, not just which direction your ship is pointed.
Fair point. Who should be on this ship? Or your rocket ship in 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions.
And some of that is management, right? Some of that is management, but some of it is leadership.
How many dimensions do we need, Anthony? Is it 2D is not enough? That's fine.
Well, if we live in the multiverse.
That's fair. So I think we agree on one thing. So there is a fundamental difference between management and leadership. And leadership, we'll call it the big picture, and management is the small picture. It's execution. It is leadership is about people and humans and direction and understanding the world. And management is about execution of a plan. Is that a fair way for us to define it to move forward?
Yeah, there's a good quote. Warren Bennis, leaders are people who do the right thing, and managers are the people that do things right. And I like that distinction. So
starting off with management, you already talked about traction. How do you think about management? What is your managerial system? When you walk into a company, how do you like to set up your system? Because I do think management fundamentally is about systems, right? It's about how do you work to solve problems? How do you execute this plan? So how do you
so Chris, I want to pull on that a little bit. So I feel like the leader's job is to define the systems, and managers are there to run the systems. I'm talking about the critical systems. So if I think the systems, when you talk about systems, yes, some of it is technology, some of it is processes and documenting the processes and documenting how you do stuff and defining the how you do things. That is really, the leader needs to be involved in that, because the how, the business logic, is core critical to how the business operates. And then management is there to make sure that you're following the systems that the leader set up. So the first thing that I like to do is first of all, do the job. So if you're a manager, if you're managing something, and you're trying to develop a system around it, you have to know, if you're going to be responsible for it, you have to know what the job is. And you have to know how to tie that job into the broader vision or broader strategy of the company. So step 1 is do the job. Step 2 is ask questions like, so if you're coming into a company that's already established, right? Or if you're trying to optimize a system that's already in place, the first thing is why is this step here? Right? The Elon Musk algorithm. All requirements are dumb. You have to eliminate requirements. You have to eliminate the things that you're doing. And if you're not adding back at the end, you haven't eliminated enough. Like, that's the first step, is to optimize the system as much as you possibly can. or create a system or a process that has as few steps as possible and only add in when it becomes obvious.
Yeah, because
And then it's handing it off.
You're moving into the world of something that is a naughty word, and it's something called micromanagement. How do you avoid not being a micromanager?
Well, and that's so I don't suffer from that. You could say I suffer from the opposite. And Chris, I'd love to hear your definition of leadership management and micromanagement. How do you draw that distinction?
Yeah, so I think leadership is about human beings first. And so, I mean, we're getting very, very, base level here, but at the end of the day, a company is a group of humans.
Yep.
You own some stuff and you do some stuff, and you might have robots or you might have AI, but at the end of it, it's human beings. And leadership is about understanding psychology and understanding the psychology of human beings, and the understanding motivation and understanding hiring and firing and values and culture and all the stuff that we talk about a lot because we love talking about that stuff. Founders love talking about values. Management is that thing that we don't talk about that much. Management is about what day do you do your one-on-ones with people? What day, how do you communicate? What is the core elements of communication that have to happen for people to do their jobs? How do you hold people accountable to those jobs? How do you define those jobs? How do you define success and failure? Those things are hard, and they're not as much fun as talking about the vision of the company. It's not about the motivation, these factors that drive us forward, right? It's about, hey, how am I gonna be able to tell you if you're successful or not? Right. And that's a hard thing. Now, one of the things that I certainly suffered from early on is that they just assumed that being a manager was also being a leader. And you're company leaders. This is big company bullshit, right? Like you walk in, you're like, well, you're a company leader. Like, no, they're not. You're a fucking TPS report mover, man. Like, leaders are people that own the strategy and direction and vision of the company, right? The rest of the people are managers. Now, part of the problem is a lot of the time people want to be leaders when the job to be done is a managerial job. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. So that is very common. And it's actually, as a leader, something that you need to figure out how to balance. And that is, people that aren't managers, doers, the people that actually do the work, the important people, they want to be managers, and managers want to be leaders. And so they're always trying to do that job when in reality, the company just needs to, can you just first do the job that I gave you? Can you just, I don't know how many salespeople I've told, can you just go and sell? Stop trying to sell me on what we should do and go sell customer on what, right? So just do your job. And an effective manager can communicate the value of just doing the job and and define purpose. Really great managers are those that actually get people excited and passionate about the job the company needs that person to do. That's a really effective manager, and hard to find. To be really frank, hard to find.
I think it is hard to find, and I do still like the idea between the visionary and integrator because it does sort of set that stuff up. So I think we've agreed the fact about there's a difference between manager and leadership, but let's define this as a founder. So in an early stage company, I think we've agreed that we need both the entire time, right? You need to have leadership even as an early stage company, even with a couple employees or just you and your co-founder. And then you need to have management as an early stage company. And then as we'll go just start there. What does leadership look like for an early stage 2, 4, 5 person company? And what does management look like for an early stage company?
Well, I mean, if you're talking less than 10 people, it should be really difficult to tell who's in charge if you just walk into the office. It, and I mean that deeply. Like, if you walk in and the founder has a big office and everybody else is in a bullpen working, and you go, "Oh, that's the CEO," I think you failed as a leader. And even as companies grow, many great leaders work in the same exact environment, don't have a big office, don't have that they might have a big office for when clients or investors meet, but they're never in it. They're always on the floor or in a different desk. And so early stage, you have to wear multiple hats, and be a leader, be a manager, and be a doer, right? And that balance is typically very fun and also very difficult, because when things get hard, you gravitate towards the thing that you are best at, and sometimes that's not leadership, and sometimes that's what your company needs. As you grow, Jeff Bezos famously said, I now make 1 to 5 decisions a year. And so, like, I mean, he is a big company, right? And that sounds like a cake job, but essentially what he's saying is, I have to have my head wrapped around the entire business and only make the decisions that have dramatic strategic impact one way or the other for the business, and let my managers and other leaders do the rest. So there's also this other phase, right? So you're an early stage founder where you're wearing all hats. Then you're a leader of a smaller team, right? And then you're a leader of leaders who have managers underneath them. And all of those roles look a little bit different. Some of us don't get to that level. Some of us don't get to be leaders of leaders. It is a dramatic mind shift that you have to make, where you're basically teaching other people how to be leaders, and you have to be a really strong leader in order to be able to do that. Anyway, I feel like I'm going in circles here, Chris. Do you have anything to say on any of that mess, that word salad?
Well, it's what you just described is one of the reasons why this job is so fucking hard.
Yeah.
It's because what you just said is that as an early stage company, I have to come in and I have to be a leader. There is no doubt. I have to come in and be able to find the right people. And even though that we're all doing everything and there's not a whole lot of job definition, I have to be able to paint a picture of the future to say, if we're successful, we can build this incredible thing. And we can change it, we can make a dent in the universe, right? We can build this thing and it's going to be amazing. This is what the future looks like. And that is leadership 101. And then the next moment, you have to turn around and get the fucking TPS reports done, or do a report for a customer, or do a proposal, or go out on an actual sales meeting. You have to do the thing. And so that in itself is really hard. And literally, when you say hats, I used to have multiple hats in the office that I would take off and on and be like, look, I'm going to put on my managerial hat here. Like, we got to go get this shit done. Right? We're not going to talk about where we're going. We just got to go do it. And then we're going to be like, oh, no, we're going to put the leadership hat and let's have this big vision talk. What you also described, though, is it's really hard to change and evolve. And part of this concept that I talk about a lot in my class is my college class, Anthony, is an idea called managerial derailment.
Look, you get this look on your face every time you talk.
I feel like I should put on my glasses
every
time that I talk about my college.
There we go.
My college.
That and the cowboy hat. I think you should be wearing both.
And managerial derailment happens with founders in a more profound way than it does even in big companies. And managerial derailment starts with the concept that the skills that got you here are not going to be the skills that get you there. And you as a founder need to change and adapt. You need to evolve your management and leadership skills and talents. And that can be very difficult. That's why you see so many, we know, how many founders do we know that got fired the time their company started to scale up and get bigger and started that job of being a manager and a leader for a bigger company? They failed at it. They were awesome early stage founders. They're excited. They would go in, they'd paint a great picture. They can even get shit done, but they would fail the moment it took a disciplined, operational, let's grow this fucking company approach. Does that resonate?
Yeah. I mean, the classic phrase, everybody's promoted to their level of, oh my gosh, their level of incompetence.
Their own incompetence.
Yeah,
That's right.
their own incompetence. So I want to hit some. So I love these obscure stats. So I've got a couple obscure stats on leadership and management. And the reason why I like these is because it kind of gives an indication of how you can be better than your competition, right? So for example, 58% of managers say they've never received a lick of management training. So maybe that's an indication of something that you could do to beat your competition, who's probably not giving their managers any training. 19% of organizations feel they are very effective at developing leaders. So not many people think they're good at this. 32% of employees would take a pay cut for a better boss. I think that's fascinating.
Right. That's crazy.
And companies with strong leadership development programs have a 1.5 times higher market share. So leadership, this stuff does matter, and investing in it does matter. Chris, I'm curious if, so we've been talking about leadership and management. I'm curious, what's your take on the contrarian perspective here? So emphasizing leadership over management or vice versa, can that hurt your company?
I think so. And I do think that it can hurt your company if you don't keep that balance of leadership and management in an early stage company.
Talk about that balance.
So, I mean, again, it's that idea where you walk in, you have to wear two hats. You have to wear the hat of, here's the vision, here's the future, here's the environment, here's the culture. And then yet we're going to be very disciplined about our approach. Now, the classic stories from our world, Anthony, is Uber, right? Uber and not Anthony, what's his name? The CEO. I met him one time. That dude, he was a fighter in the culture of the company. He was a terrific leader, but when it came to actually executing and creating a good work environment and managing, the company failed miserably. And they suffered mightily. Even a company with huge market share, was going public, all that sort of stuff, right? They couldn't manage. He couldn't change and adjust along the way. You had a great culture that was fun and scrappy and fight, let's go fight the fight. But they couldn't adjust. And so the point there being, you need both. And as a founder, you have to wear both of those hats early on. You have to. There's not enough people in the company to be like, look, you're the manager, I'm the leader. Right?
So you're talking about Travis Kalanick?
Travis, yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Okay.
So
what happens? I'm going to ask you some quick question. What happens when you have too much leadership without management?
Yeah, I think that's what happens is you can have this incredible culture. You can have an incredible vision. Everybody can be inspired and you don't get shit done. You don't actually go deliver that because you don't have the discipline to go build the thing.
And what happens when you have too much management and not enough leadership?
Yeah, you have a fucking terrible culture. So you have great processes. You have unbelievably well-run, disciplined company that reports regularly. You have great financials, all that sort of stuff, but you're never going to get anywhere because there is no vision of where we're going. We're not, and you're going to have a hard time hiring people. You're going to have a hard time keeping people, all those sorts of things. So it really is one of this is an art, particularly in the early stage, more than it is a science. You got to know both and you got to be good at both. But when you apply that, is really hard. I mean, does that resonate? And I think I've messed it up at times. I think I've walked in and tried to be a leader when my job was to be a manager. And I think vice versa.
I yeah, I mean, this is it's a classic it's a classic misnomer that somebody can do both long term well. So I can act as a manager for a while, and then I really suck at it. So uh, so yeah, I do think you have to treat both as a craft. You have to recognize which one you're good at, and then go chase that. So, this podcast is really for founders. And when we talk about founders, Chris, I always put, and I might be wrong here, so I'm curious. I'd love your input on this. I always think the founder is the leader, and the founder is like the visionary is the founder. That's the classic position of a founder. And in reality, some founders might be really good managers.
Absolutely.
They might be the really good integrators. And therefore shouldn't take on that CEO role, which might be a difficult step down, a perceived step down from founders. Have you seen that in your career where somebody's like, hey, I don't want the leadership role. Like I've seen that job. I don't want it.
Yeah.
And have actually taken and had the self-awareness to step into management, or they should have and they didn't. Have you ever thought through it that way?
I mean, you and I have both seen it. We've seen it with companies that have grown and gotten large rounds. And part of the round is like, hey, I'm getting a C round and we're going to try to go public and we need a professional manager to come in the room. And you're like, great. The classic place where founders go is chief innovation officer. It is the goal of every founder to be a chief innovation officer. You know why, Anthony? Zero accountability. You're an innovation officer. You don't have you're just innovating. Like, that's pretty cool, right? But it's hard because, again, as a founder, you have to have a strong ego. Your ego is critical to your success. You have to believe you can succeed when other people fail. But the humility to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm not the right person to lead this company anymore is a very hard and difficult step. And it's one that I think I've only seen it done successfully a few times. Here's a question, though, I want to ask you. And this is a big one. Can you teach leadership? You can teach management. I know you can teach management. But can you teach leadership?
You can't teach it, but you can learn it.
Explain.
Well, I mean, so leadership comes from a desire to be a leader, and you go out and you hunt for things that make you a better leader. You go and you self-identify your weaknesses, and you self-identify the things that your company needs from you. And so if you want to be a great leader, that manifests in your passion for teaching yourself, for learning, your curiosity. And so if you don't have that curiosity, if you're trying to teach somebody to be a leader that doesn't have that curiosity, you're teaching a pig to dance, right? So it's not going to get you anywhere, and it's just going to frustrate the pig. Hold
on. Make sure we get my cowboy hat back on here. It's a pretty profound point, even though we're talking about pigs to dance. Which is, I mean, it's the first time ever we've made a profound point while actually talking about pigs. It's an interesting point, which is learning to be a good leader starts with one of the most hardest thing that any founder or really company leader does, which is look themselves in the mirror and go, I am far from fucking perfect. I have tons of flaws, but I want to be curious about how I show up in the world. And I genuinely want to try and learn and improve. That is a dark and scary place for the vast majority of human beings to go.
What do you think, Chris, is the number, like, What is the number one trait, the number one and number two traits of a great leader?
The thing that keeps popping into my head, which is this is where that crazy dichotomy comes into effect about being a founder, is you have to be humble and hungry. Humility. You have to be humble to be a good leader. You have to be humble enough to understand what you're good at, what you're not good at, get feedback and accept it and get better and grow and learn. You have to be. So I would say the second piece, and this is directly to your point, is you have to be growth oriented. The buzzword in managerial circles is called growth mindset. You have to be somebody who believes that challenges, you're not fixed, you're not finished. You can improve, you can get better at things. It is very hard to be a good leader with a fixed mindset. Growth mindset, I think, is probably that most important thing. What do you think? That's a really good question.
So I don't think humility I think it's important, but I don't think it's on the top of the list. I mean, they've done studies where there's not a big difference between psychopaths and narcissists and leaders. It's like CEOs of big companies. So
Yeah.
there's been a lot of great leaders that are narcissists. So I don't know. I don't know if humility fits, but you did tug on something in that this curiosity thing, which is what I said before, and I agree with that. But I think the number one trait is energy.
Interesting.
Passion. It's the driver of the growth, not just the revenue growth, but the overall growth of the company. And I have not met many great leaders that were low energy. I've met or that didn't bring energy into a room or passion to a project. That could, and part of that is salesmanship, and part of that is storytelling, but fundamentally it comes down to the leader is the fuel of the car, not the engine. So without the fuel, you're not going anywhere. You need that energy to push it somewhere. That's how I. So energy is the top of my list. What do you think?
You've persuaded me. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's a great analogy, and I don't know that I've ever heard it phrased exactly that way. But leaders have passion. They are set on a vision of changing the world in their particular way, even if it's a tiny little, way that they think that they can adjust it.
It's also excitement. It's like, can you believe we get to do this every day? Like, how cool is it's that kind of, it's not just passion for the thing that you're doing. It's enthusiasm for the process itself.
So now is the difficult question, because I agree, but almost by definition, to be a great manager does not necessarily mean that you are a great leader. So what are the factors, traits, attributes of a great manager?
So a great manager has should have a lot more empathy for people. That does, right? So they generally are much more people focused and hey, I'm going to get my team to do this rather than taking personal credit for something that happens. They get excited about team achievement. I think that's the number one trait of a manager. And that you either have it or you don't, right? It's who you are, who you're not. Ironically, I think I'm not going to say that. Like that could be misinterpreted, so I'm going to skip that one. So I also think they need to be systems minded. They need a process to follow, where leaders have an allergy to process, where managers are like, if there's a process missing, they make one. I think those are the two. I think those two would be my top two for managers.
So as we wrap up this conversation, I, as a founder, early stage founder, maybe I'm thinking about getting something going. I know that I need to understand the difference between management and leadership, but what do I actually do? What is the practical advice you can give me? Because we've kind of said a little bit, some of this is just attributes, some of this is who you are.
Yeah.
But you know that to be successful in any early stage company, you have to have both things. So what are the things that I can do as a founder to make sure that I am doing the right stuff, that my company has an opportunity to succeed?
Well, first of all, so let's talk about the how. So first of all is the self-assessment, right? So identify whether you're more of a leader or a manager. Great book on this is StrengthsFinder. I think it's a really easy read. We've talked about it before. Like know thyself. First rule, know thyself. And get good with what you're strong at and go find partners where you're weak. You do need to balance both skills. So you need to be good enough in both areas. And then kind of bolster the areas where you're weak. But also recognize in that self-assessment that you can't do that. You can't do the things that you suck at long-term. You can fake it for a while, but you can't do it long-term.
Yeah.
Then you have to delegate the things that you're weak at. So hire team members, get an integrator or get a visionary. I don't know how easy it would be to hire a visionary that wasn't an asshole, but
I think you can do it though. You can
you can do it.
People that come in and that are that crazy salesperson, the rainmaker, the big visionary that can walk out, and bring your vision to reality. That is
there is at least one visionary on this podcast that isn't an asshole. At least one.
Where?
There might be two, but there's at least one. Delegate and bring the people in that aren't weak or that are strong where you're weak. We talked about setting a clear vision and goals. So making sure whether or not you're the visionary integrator, value that vision and goals that you set for your company and make sure it's well communicated. That gets to the next one. Communicate effectively. Management or leadership, you have to be an effective communicator. Both in where you're going, where you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, storytelling, all of those things that we've talked about in the past, super important in either leadership or management. Given the stats, I think you need to invest in training. It's obvious an area of opportunity. You need to figure out how to get your team involved in training, either leadership training, marketing training, sales training. Like get involved with continually up leveling your team. Not only will it make your company better, but your employees will like it. The people that work with you will enjoy the up leveling and learning of their skills. Lead by example. You do the job. You model the behavior. This gets into good parenting advice, right? So it's a lot of good leadership advice is good parenting advice as well. It really is. Not that you employ your children, but model. But
are they? Are they? Sometimes they act like children. I think you can agree.
Sometimes. But yeah, you have to model good behavior, and then you have to constantly monitor and adjust, regularly review your approach, and make the necessary changes. That's what I've got on the how-to, Chris.
It's the only thing I'll add is find somebody that will tell you the truth, because it's both roles.
Yep.
People have a disincentive to tell you the truth.
Yep. Right? I agree. So
they're going to lie to you. You're a great leader. You're a terrific manager. So, you mentioned StrengthsFinder, get a 360. When you have 5 or 6 people in your company, get somebody to come in and do a 360 evaluation of you as a leader and a manager and get real and honest feedback and change and learn along the way. 360s fucking terrify founders. I don't know why, But when I mention that to founders, it's not hard. You can self-administer if you want, but having a facilitator is usually better. Like, go in and ask the questions about how you're showing up. Like, and it's not lying, right? You think you're showing up in a way, and it turns out you have halitosis and your breath is terrible and nobody wants to be around you. I'm not saying you, Anthony. I'm just using it as a hypothetical. Woo, I think we all
for everybody on the podcast.
Yeah. All right. Deep dive recommendations, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey, he was a genius in this. He talked a lot about the psychological principles about being a great leader. Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. Just really basically anything Simon Sinek has done over the last several years, it's really been about leadership. I think it's a strong one. The 1 Minute Manager, Drive the Surprising Truth, What Motivates Us by Daniel Pink. Why Good Leaders Make You Feel Safe by Simon Sinek. Really, like I said, just about anything he does. Podcast, The Learning Leader Show, episodes on leadership versus management, and the article, Leadership That Gets Results from
I know.
the Harvard Business Review, Anthony.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah. So it's been a really actually super interesting conversation. And it's kind of one of those things. I thought it was going to be really a simple conversation. It turns out to be way more nuanced, and particularly the fact that the skills you have to develop are similar for both roles, but they are distinct roles. So what do we have coming up next time, Anthony? It is Halloween next week, right?
Yeah, next week on Election Day.
Oh, great.
We are talking about.
We're just going to get it all out there. We're just going to do a politics.
We're talking about bringing politics into the workplace. No, we're never going to talk about. Well, maybe we'll talk about that. I've always thought about having a podcast episode. Leave us some comments if you're interested in this. But 2 things that I've noticed leaders do. Some leaders bring politics into the workplace, and I think we should talk about that. Some leaders also bring in religion into the workplace. And I would love to talk, maybe that's one episode where we talk about when do you bring your personal value system in to workplace. I'm going to write that down. I think that would be an interesting podcast episode. All right. But next week, we are going to be talking about the difference between consensus and collaboration. And there's a huge difference between those two. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation next week, Chris. For everybody that's watching, please go to howtofounder.com to find out where to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, LinkedIn, YouTube. Please follow us. Leave comments on LinkedIn. Go to linkedin.com/company/howtofounder to leave comments and follow the page. And with that, I thank you very much, Chris, for this week. I thank you for forgiving me for last week, and I will see you in a few days. Take care, Chris. Take care, everybody.